Hello, it's Therapy Tip Thursday. Today's topic, secondary trauma. I'm doing research right now to put the finishing touches on a presentation that I'm doing next week at Savannah State on secondary trauma and the correlations or efficacy with appropriate self-care. So I thought I would take the time to define secondary trauma, vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, and burnout. Those terms are usually used interchangeably in the mental health profession, but they actually are different from one another. The first one is compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue occurs when healthcare professionals are caring for others and showing compassion towards others, and it leaves them mentally, physically drained, emotionally drained. Basically, it's giving from a compassionate place all day long on your regular shift and feeling very depleted at the end of the day. The perfect remedy or antidote for compassion fatigue is proper self-care. So let's say you have a full day of being a therapist and seeing clients. It is wise that after you get off from work that you do something first to take care of you. It could be a small meditation. It can be going and getting yourself a milkshake. It could be going and just walking through the mall and doing some window shopping, but something that just focuses on you and what you want to do. 10-15 minutes should be enough to get you what you need. Of course, you need to have the proper meal for dinner and also get the proper rest so that you can go back the next day and be in a good frame of mind to continue to do the work that you do. Compassion fatigue. Next one is vicarious trauma. Vicarious trauma usually happens when a healthcare professional hears the struggles or the traumatic events of someone that they are directly caring for. It can result in symptoms very similar to PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. It can cause the person that's experiencing the vicarious trauma to think that they too have also experienced that trauma. One of the key differences in vicarious trauma and secondary trauma, in my opinion, is a level of resiliency. And resiliency, I think I've talked about before, pretty much lies in your support system and your level of connectedness to others. When you have a strong support system and the ability to connect to others, to lean on them when things happen or when you hear really heavy experiences, when you have someone to bounce that off of or to reassure you that you are supported through that experience, you may have vicarious trauma as a healthcare professional. Next is secondary trauma. In secondary trauma, same thing happens in vicarious trauma in that you are going to hear a traumatic event from someone that you have talked to. Let's say you have a client and they tell you that they've been raped. And you start to have symptoms as though you actually experienced that rape. In secondary trauma, you have even more symptoms of PTSD and could actually have a diagnosis of PTSD. Signs of irritability, blaming others, forgetfulness, inability to work accurately, depression, withdrawal or isolation. These are all symptoms of PTSD and also secondary trauma. Secondary trauma has a lower level of resilience. The person that's experiencing it doesn't feel that they have any options. They really feel that they too are experiencing that particular traumatic event and may have feelings of hopelessness. When you get to a stage of secondary trauma as a healthcare professional, you really need to seek some supervision from your superior and possibly look into your employee assistance program or a counseling service to help you to process through that traumatic experience. And lastly is burnout. Burnout happens when a healthcare professional has worked and worked probably had compassion fatigue initially, had some vicarious trauma experiences, eventually led to some secondary trauma experiences. But the difference is, or what gets you to a state of burnout, is when you haven't offered yourself the appropriate level of self-care. And so you have depleted and depleted and depleted yourself and never replenished yourself. When you get to this particular state in your profession, you are angry, bitter, resentful. You don't focus well on your job. You're not of really any good use to yourself, nor to your colleagues, and definitely not to the clients that you're trying to work with. When you reach a point of burnout, you really need to consider a different profession. You need to look and reflect back and say, maybe this is not the profession for me. No profession should leave you in a place of burnout. No profession should leave you in a place where you dread going to work every day. If you've reached the point of burnout, or you think you have, I strongly suggest you maybe seek out some therapy or someone in your support network to help you to decipher what steps you might want to take next. Another profession probably is the wisest choice. Burnout is very prevalent in the healthcare profession, also in the education profession. Teachers, doctors, nurses, therapists, people that work in nursing homes, people who work in hospitals, firefighters, policemen. These are all professions that require a great level of compassion, a great level of giving of oneself. And again, when you don't replace that, when you don't replenish that with the appropriate level of self-care, you reach a place of burnout, which is a place of no return. So I encourage and implore you to review this particular video, listen to the definitions for each particular term that I've given, and decipher where you might be in that circle in your profession. And again, if you're at the place of burnout, don't be in denial. It's okay. Just look at what alternatives you can make. A lot of people feel like there's no hope. If they're at burnout place and this job is their livelihood, they cannot afford to quit the job because that's how they support their household. There's always an option. You just have to take the time to explore it. And you can do that with a career counselor. You can do that with a therapist. You can do that with a really supportive, unbiased friend. But I just encourage you to do so. No one should have to live in a place of bitterness. Well, that's my information for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. Happy sailing and be well.